This is the story of how I built my new home in Lightyear Frontier in 50 days. Since Earth wasn't habitable anymore, I decided to look for a new home in outer space. However, my spaceship crashed. I found myself in the middle of a forest without my spaceship, so I started exploring. I took in the beautiful and vibrant surroundings with creatures I'm not familiar with, and eventually found my mech in the dirt. Some parts got dislocated, so I repaired it real quick and flipped it over to make sure all the mechanisms and whatnot are working fine. I then got greeted by Piper, that green orb in the sky, telling me that I should start gathering some tools which are scattered around. I got a vacuum harvester which lets me harvest seeds and fill my mech up with water. Then I got a spike saw which lets me chop down trees and break rocks. I can use the slice option to cut through several trees at once or the drill option to chop down trees faster. I stumbled upon a new area called Pine Heights, which looks like a very barren area filled with noxious gases and slimes all around. Here, I got an irrigation hose which lets me water crops and remove these noxious slimes. I cleared some up, but I left the rest for later since I wanted to get all of my tools first. While I was exploring and gathering my tools, Piper said she knows all about the project where my mech and spaceship came from. It was called the Farm Mech Project, which was an amazing venture, but it got cancelled in the end since the people opted to stay in Mars instead, where they tried. For a few generations at least. I found a seed shooter but didn't have any seeds to plant, so I gathered some polyberry seeds off the ground. I also collected some aluminum I found along the way. The final tool is a sprout cannon which lets me plant trees and flowers. I gathered some blue color flower sprouts, then started my quest to find an area to call home. I tried several locations, but I wanted a place with a nearby water supply and lots of flat open space, so I eventually settled on this spot. I placed my tent in a cozy corner here and started cleaning up the area. I also added some decorations like campfire, flower bed, fences, and a mailbox. The decorations gave my tent a buff that lets me have a keen eye the next day, which means I'll be able to gather additional resources. Day 2. Before I expand my base, I tested out recycling a fence to see if I'll get all the materials used back. I did, so I became more confident in adding structures since I'll be able to move locations easily anyway. I then made a workshop shed, placed an oil presser inside, and started crafting some plant oil. The shed helps make this process more efficient. I also needed to plant some crops, so I made a planter box while being supervised by a colorful chicken and planted some polyberry seeds. This is exactly why I wanted a nearby water supply for my base. It's very easy to refill my irrigation hose, which I'm going to be using to water the crops. After that, I needed to build an upgrade depot, and for that we needed an aluminum frame, so I wanted to build an assembler and a fodder oven. But I didn't have enough materials, so I went off to gather some. Good thing I had the keen eye buff, which made the process easier. It was so easy that I ended up gathering more than my mech can take. I became over-encumbered and I couldn't jump or sprint, so I waddled my way very slowly back to camp. I finished the construction of my fodder oven and assembler, and since we had a bit of a storage issue, I made some storage chests. One for plants and the other for materials. My machines here are high-tech and it can automatically detect the items inside the storage box and use it for its process. For example, I crafted 2 aluminum frames in the assembler using the aluminum rods inside the chest. I also made some basic fodder and went off to feed the chickens. They were fast asleep, but I guess everyone wakes up for free food. It pooped some stone as a thank you gift. The others gave me a fiber and an aluminum rod. Sheesh, I wonder what these creatures eat. I don't think I want to find out. I also found this nest by the beach, so I placed 3 basic fodders there as well. Doing this didn't give me any materials, but that's okay since I'm doing this to help out the ecosystem. Day 3. Feeding the animals restored extra resources in the meadow, so I was very pleased. I took a moment to admire the beginnings of my new home with my new friends. After a while, I watered my plants and removed the noxious weeds that grew in the empty spaces of my planter. I wanted to place my upgrade depot behind my shed, but this giant chicken, who I'm gonna name Arturo, is in the way. I had to intimidate him to place my depot. I did not have aluminum to complete the construction, so I went to gather some. See, there were a lot more ores available this day since I fed the animals. I took the longer route home since I wanted to clean some of the noxious slimes in Pine Heights. During this, I encountered an ancient megastructure that has these strange artifacts. It was scattered all around the structure, and I had to get out of my mech to get to some. I collected all 9 of it and discovered that the place was a dam, and also learned how to craft a strange table. I continued exploring, took my mech for a swim, and got some petrified eggs. I cleared up 67% of Pine Heights before heading to bed. Day 4. I harvested my polyberries and immediately started processing them into oil. I planted more seeds and made sure to water it all. I also completed the construction of my upgrade depot but didn't have enough materials for any upgrade. I wanted to make more materials but Arturo was waiting for me and had his revenge. Fair play, Arturo. You and me are not yet finished though. The oil presser was taking a little too long, so I made another one before continuing my quest in Pine Heights. It took a bit of exploration until I finally found the remaining slimes near this really cute waterfall and completely restored Pine Heights. After that, I went back home and upgraded my mech with a seed shooter lock-on. I then completely forgot that my mech has a flashlight and traversed through some dark forests that night. I was able to find a new location called Edge Cliffs with another ancient high-tech looking structure that I just had to explore. I collected all 14 artifacts, the last piece being in a sneaky place right here, and learned how to craft a strange signpost. It turns out the place was an underground lab of some sort. I wonder what shady things they did here to be in a cave hidden in the forest. Day 5, I didn't make it back home and just passed out right outside the cave. I dreamt about how I restored Pine Heights to its original glory, so now it has some materials that I can collect. There's also this mysterious door where an additional arrow lit up. I got a bug fossil and accidentally discovered a new area called Lowland Plains. However, I wanted to focus on Edge Cliffs first, so I went back and discovered this gross amount of noxious weeds in the area. While cleaning up, I got a message from someone named Lola, who is a merchant and wants to trade with me. I was getting lonely even with Piper, so I made it a mission to build a dock for Lola. I then encountered this waterfall right here, and honestly, I'm not sure if the water is purple due to contamination, or if it's really like that. Either way, I think it's a really pretty spot, so I stayed for a bit to cool down from my exploration. Afterwards, I learned the hard way that you should not go through dense forest areas with a giant mech. Finally, I was able to restore Edge Cliffs. I saw another one of those structures and collected the 7 artifacts. These ones were quite easy to find. I discovered the landing pod and the recipe for a strange chair. Afterwards, I stumbled upon Stepstone Peak with some slimes that my current irrigation hose cannot remove, so I went back home for the day where I dreamt about Edge Cliffs and that door once more. It was raining the next day, so I had a small break from watering my crops. I was able to gather enough materials to increase my inventory capacity and upgrade my tent to a small cabin. This cabin now has 2 buffs, Keen Eye from before, and Animal Friend, which makes animals take up additional resources when fed, but I needed to put more decorations for these buffs. So, I placed a clothesline and a wash basin. I needed to get more items, so I got some coal and aluminum, decided to make 9 basic fodder, built additional chests, and completely forgot about my house. Instead, I went around the area to feed creatures, croblings, red scallions, and swift bloom. Then I gathered more wood and realized I didn't check if there are new seeds from Pine Heights, so I went there and discovered a new plant called rabbage. But they were quite hard to spot at night, so I just got a few. I tried to get some of these red crystals as well, but my spike saw was not strong enough. I added 2 planter boxes and planted the rabbage seeds. I finally remembered to increase the amount of decorations around my house, so I finished constructing the wash basin, placed 4 torches, added 2 planter boxes, and placed a flag. I unlocked the special buff just in time for sunrise, and I got as much sleep as I could with the limited time. Day 7, I got a resource boost in the meadows for feeding all the nests. I harvested and turned my polyberries into oil. I tried out my seed shooter upgrade and it was so satisfying to use. The harvest gave me enough items to upgrade my spike saw power, which can harvest the more advanced ores. I crafted another chest and 6 nice fodders before going to Pine Heights. My upgraded saw was able to break the red crystals, so I mined some. Then I went around to feed some red scallions, who gave me some extra red crystals and rabbages. I also found a nest for stocktails, but the creatures here poop good materials, so I just fed them all directly. I was convinced I can take a shortcut back home, but instead almost got a shortcut to heaven. After a few attempts though, I was able to make it up this cliff and jump down directly to my base. I wanted to build a merchant landing beside my upgrade depot, but apparently the ground is not even enough in that area, so I had to place it here. Since I fed all the animals in the meadow, I spent the rest of the day gathering materials there. All of the nodes here had aluminum this day, which was great. The next day, I added a new planter box since I assumed that the merchant is gonna give me more seeds to plant. Then suddenly, I got attacked by some noxious weeds falling out from the sky. I guess it's not happy with me cleaning up this planet little by little. It was actually nice to watch the weeds while it's falling down, but I knew that it was gonna destroy my crops, so I used my vacuum to snatch them out of the sky before it could land. The merchant arrived, so I looked through my inventory and saw the flowers were selling for quite a bit. The bug fossil, petrified egg, and geode shards also sell for a lot, but they are currently not in demand, so I decided to wait until they are before selling those. I got around 400 from my flowers, and I used that to buy 9 wheat seeds and 7 radish seeds. I wanted a different planter for my wheat, but the shooter auto-switched to it when I ran out of radish seeds, so I let my plants be chaotic for a while. I did add another planter box though. I gathered aluminum, coal, and red crystals before calling it a day. Day 9, I harvested polyberry and rabbage, processed it into oil, and made sure to replant my seeds. I then upgraded my irrigation hose to have hydro splash, which enables it to water multiple mounds at the same time like this. I added another plot before heading off to Edge Cliffs. There, I gathered a new plant called Karut, mined some copper, and found some geode shards. After that, I advanced to the next area called Lowland Plains, and found out that my vacuum harvester needs an upgrade to clear the weeds there, so I went back to Edge Cliffs where I found this pond rock. I used my upgraded saw to remove it, which resulted to a small pond here beneath the landing pod. I continued gathering more color flowers before heading back home. Arturo tried to stop me again, but I made another shed and placed a flower press inside. Unfortunately, I sold all my blue color flowers, so I could only make some red paint. The process takes quite a while, so I headed to bed while waiting. The next morning, I harvested my wheat seeds. I was getting annoyed at the arrangement of my crops, so I decided to not plant the seeds again that day. Instead, I made this grinder, which was quite a big structure. Afterwards, I crafted some paint and tried out my paint gun. I could change several items into other colors, but I decided to just change my flag into red. I wanted to see the other paint colors before I painted more. I started grinding some red crystals and stone into dust, upgraded my mech to have increased water tank capacity, then messed around with the assembler to craft more items like copper wires and aluminum electronics. I then crafted more storage boxes and added a planter box. I planted my Karut seeds, and since I saw that I needed Karut oil on a lot of upgrades, I gave up on my crop arrangement and just planted some anywhere. I also planted the color flower seeds all around my home area. These flower sprouts only need to be watered once. Day 11. Noxious bubbles appeared while I was harvesting my crops. These are slightly more annoying to get rid of since I needed to refill my hose every now and then, but I was able to defend my crop area. After getting plenty of harvest, I went off to gather more items like copper ores, aluminum ores, and red crystals. I also stumbled into new areas called Mountainside Coast and Yellow Forest, but my mech was not yet strong enough to clear the contamination in those areas. I got another reminder to be careful about passing through forests with my mech while on my way home. Once back home, I started grinding some noxious spores and more red crystals. I also added another grinder to make this process faster. Day 12. As part of my daily routine now, I took care of my crops and turned what I could into oil. Then, I upgraded my irrigation hose power to wash away the stronger slimes. I turned some of my stone dust into clay and used that to craft a furnace and smelt some red crystal dust into red glass. After that, I did some trading with Lola. I sold all my geode shards for 1,800 and got some items that were on sale. The vintage windshield was a very good purchase. It removed the metal bars from my mech POV, and now I have a better view of my surroundings. I then started clearing up the slime in Stepstone Peak with my stronger hose and eventually fully restored the area. I rolled around in celebration and just passed out in that region. Since Stepstone Peak was restored, I took a look around to see what the area has to offer. I got some fossil fish, which I can sell for a good amount, collected some chromase seeds, and found some iron deposits. My spike saw was not strong enough to mine it though. Someone started reaching out to me from some radio tower while I was exploring, but the signal was bad and I needed to go uphill to find a better reception. I found a yellow color flower and some bug fossils, then came across the door that I've been seeing in my dreams. Piper explained that I must have activated some mechanisms here since the readings are different from before, but I needed to do more to fully activate it. I gathered more copper ores, then I headed off to the uphill location pinned on my map. While trying to make my way there, I made it back to my home instead, so I took some time to take care of my homestead and say hi to Arturo. I was finally able to harvest my crops and rearrange it so that only one type of crop is in a planter box. I added another oil presser and made sure to process my carrot into oil. I also made some yellow paint and left most of my machines processing materials while I slept for the day. The next day, I crafted red and clear lens, upgraded my vacuum harvester power, and increased my vacuum harvester range. By that time, I had enough noxious spores to make some power cores, which unlocked some more recipes. I also noticed that I can now make a larger planter box, so I made one and put my chromase there, even if I only had 2 seeds with me. I crafted some nice fodder in preparation for the creatures in edge cliffs, but it was getting dark, so I just collected more materials near my home. My spike saw was already upgraded, so I managed to get some hardwood from these large green trees and softwood from large pine trees. Day 15, I was able to harvest my crops, so I transformed some small plots to large ones. Arturo seemed to have a problem with my decision, so I had to scare him off, but felt so guilty when he went straight into the pond. I thought he was drowning, but apparently, he could chill underwater just fine. I'm gonna admit, I felt relieved to see him just walk back up again. I was starting to get fond of this giant chicken. I eventually remembered the person who sent a radio transmission for help and made my way uphill for a better reception. I made it to Yellow Forest and came across these giant bone remains. Whoa, just look at the size of this. Thankfully, my vacuum harvester and hose can get rid of the noxious weeds and slimes here, so I started restoring the area and made my way to this place with a good reception. I needed to construct a radio tower, but it needs a lot of items which I sadly didn't have at the time. Instead, I just focused on fully restoring the area. While exploring more, Piper let me know that there were other robots like her, but they didn't survive, so Piper has been alone for 100 years already. I slept while feeling bad for her and dreamt of Yellow Forest. I got attacked by weeds the next day and I cleared it all up with my upgraded vacuum. I then increased my spike saw damage, allowing it to break materials in fewer hits. Upgraded my thruster boost, allowing my mech to jump higher and stay in the air for longer, and upgraded my seed shooter to lock on up to 18 mounts at once. I tested out my new thruster boost while waiting for carrot oil to finish processing. Once it was done, I upgraded my spike saw power to break stronger materials like iron. After that, I gathered all the materials needed to build a radio tower and went back to Yellow Forest where I got some zapper twig seeds and mined these really pretty blue crystals. I constructed the radio tower and was greeted by Ulf from the big red planet next door. He's been experimenting with the fauna in his planet and now he has run out of supplies, so he needs me to gather some for him for a price. He was willing to give me 800 just for 4 blue color flowers, so I immediately accepted the quest. There were also some easy quests from the merchant, so I accepted those as well. I collected more blue crystals and some iron ore before heading to a new area called Mountainside Coast. My vacuum can get rid of the weeds, but my hose was not strong enough for the slimes. So I started heading back and found another ancient site. All of the artifacts were inside this mountain chamber, and I collected all of it to get the recipe for a strange vase. I spent the night inside that chamber and continued gathering stuff the next day. I got some gravel gourd sprout, more petrified eggs, more iron, and some chromase seeds. Back home, I just bought some more chromase and zapper twigs from Lola and planted it. Then, I went to collect blue color flowers for the radio request. I started smelting some iron and decided that my house needs an upgrade. Since this house is quite big, I had to remove all my previous decorations. I immediately regretted this decision as I realized that I did not have enough materials to construct the house. I had to make a temporary tent area with a few decorations so I can sleep and at least get the keen eye buff. The next day, I took care of my crops, built more storage boxes, started grinding some blue crystals to dust, and processed one steel bar just to see the recipes it will unlock. I gathered more red crystals, then went back to the radio tower to turn in my quests. I earned a lot of money and even finished another one by turning in some polyberries for 1,000. The merchant wants some ravage, which is quite easy, but Ulf wanted 150 wheats. I wish I'd planted more of those since the reward was 10,000. It did seem like a long quest, so I didn't get that. By completing my first requests, I got a recipe for a request board which grants remote access to the radio. Thankfully, I won't have to travel all the way here to get and turn in quests once I get that set up. I gathered more iron and copper before going home where I got a warm welcome from Arturo. I made a small shed which has a bigger storage capacity, some iron electronics, and some iron frames before calling it a day. Day 19, I saw Arturo eating some of my crops. Then we were both attacked by noxious slimes. Arturo did not help at all and even got in my way while I was protecting my crops, so we had an intense heart-to-heart talk and he had the audacity to walk away from me. I then decided to spend the day trying to rearrange my homestead since I unlocked the recipe for an enormous barn. I started recycling most of my structures and placed the materials inside some small sheds that I temporarily built beside my soon-to-be house. The process was tedious since I needed to collect some hardwood for the sheds while I was over-encumbered. The sun was already setting when I finally had enough space for the barn, but I didn't have enough iron bars to complete construction. I had to make a makeshift workshop area right here with some necessary equipment so I could make the materials. I also noticed that my cauliflower sprouts wilted when I removed the flower, so I just destroyed it. Day 20, I harvested zapper twigs and processed some into oil. I made some sour fodder and fed some snorks at the Yellow Forest. They gave me some stones and blue crystals. I accepted more quests from the radio tower and found this cave which has some white cauliflowers and another snork's nest, so I also left some fodder there. I also gathered a few blue crystals from that cave. While looking for the last nest, I discovered this area by the beach and got a clam. I tried to cross to the other side, but I think my thrust boosters were not yet strong enough. I couldn't find the last nest, so I just got more iron, then went to Edge Cliff where I was able to feed a stocktail nest and gather a few copper. I left some iron smelting before sleeping. The next morning, I harvested the zapper twigs and chromase, so I was able to rearrange my area better. I placed 4 planter boxes beside the barn near this pond, then gathered softwood to finally construct the barn. I placed my processors inside, adding more copies of the ones I frequently use and wait for. I then processed my chromase into oil and placed more storage boxes since I seem to always run out of storage space. Additionally, I built my upgrade depot and merchant's landing once more. Then, I moved all the sheds near my barn since my processor sadly cannot detect the items when the shed was beside my house. I passed out while trying to arrange my home as best as I could. Day 22, I was able to remove the last piece of large planter here and rearrange it to fit my area better. I moved my house a little more to the right and removed my temporary tent because I finally had everything for a proper house. The area was looking a little bit better, but I still needed to add decorations to make it more homey. I earned some money from the radio tower quests, so I splurged on some decorations. I also sold some of the items I collected to get some of my money back. I was able to upgrade my spike saw power again, so it can now handle even stronger materials. My vacuum harvester also got an upgrade, allowing it to gather resources in a wider area. I then realized that I should have prioritized upgrading my hose or vacuum instead of my spike saw since I ran out of chromase oil for those. I did some decorating before heading to bed. Day 23, I moved my grinder nearer my house since it kinda got covered by the barn. Unfortunately, my items from chests cannot be detected here, so I placed a wooden crate just for the items I will use in the grinder. I made a mental note to buy the items on sale in Lola's shop since she gives quite a good discount. I got the water pump for 50% off. I bought more Chromie's seeds too and made myself broke in the process. I arranged my storage and continued decorating the area until I got a third buff from the house. It's called Critical Strike. My spike saw now has a chance to deal additional damage. Day 24, my homestead was becoming pretty cozy and I was proud of my progress, but I guess the weeds weren't and launched another attack on my crops. My vacuum harvester was already good enough to fend off the attack easily though. I got a Chromie's harvest this day and I immediately processed those into oil, but it wasn't enough to craft all the iron parts I needed for the host upgrade. I collected more ores, coal, and crystals, then left some iron and steel smelting while I rested for the night. Day 25, I still didn't have enough Chromie's oil, so I decided to aim for another upgrade. I made some battery and steel electronics from copper wire, zapper twigs, and steel bars. I also made some blue lens and I was able to increase my vacuum harvester power. I wanted to get more Chromie's seeds, but I could only buy 9 with my depleting funds, so I built a request board to earn more. I was able to easily complete 2 quests, earn some money, and buy more Chromie's seeds from Lola. My mech was getting tired, so I decided to sleep early. Day 26. While waiting for more Chromie's oil for my new harvest, I tinkered with the composter box. I couldn't figure out what to do with it though. I was able to upgrade my irrigation hose power to wash away stronger slime. Then I noticed that I can now upgrade my inventory capacity, so I immediately did that. I was also able to increase my sprint seed and irrigation hose range. There were other upgrades I could get, but I wanted to focus on unlocking other areas, so I went to Mountainside Coast. The slimes here were much harder to remove. I also vacuumed up some weeds and came across this pretty cave filled with water. Eventually, I completely restored Mountainside Coast and slept outside. I was excited to start up my day and immediately went to Lowland Plains to continue my planet cleanup. I got distracted by what looks like giant bones in the distance and tripped over some stones on the way before starting my work. It was way easier to clean up the noxious weeds here compared to the slimes, but I still had to wash some slimes here and there. I also found a pond pitcher and discovered I can get water from it, so I immediately got its sprout to plant in my farm. I completely restored Lowland Plains, so I went back to Mountainside Coast to see what resources I could get there. I got some yellow crystals, iron, and some seeds from this really cute plant called Lumbloom. I also saw some of these creatures called Morning Drope, and they are so pretty. I made 2 additional large plots, planted my Lumbloom, which sparkles at night, then started processing my yellow crystal to dust. I finally headed to bed after a long day and dreamt of really cool ores in Lowland Plains and saw that the final arrow on the door lit up. The next morning, I admired my small, cozy house for a bit, then noticed some noxious bubbles falling down my crops too late. After washing away those slimes, I planted the pond pitcher on either side of my crop area here. I then gathered enough materials to increase my irrigation hose hydro splash in order to water a larger area, increase my water tank capacity, and increase the damage from my spike saw. It was getting late, so I just turned in some quests for money and slept early for once. Day 29. I was a bit annoyed since my upgraded hose cannot cover the large plots completely yet. I bought the item on sale and got more Lumbloom and wheat from the merchant before heading off to investigate the strange door finally. It opened up to this really high-tech looking tunnel, which led to an open area filled with water. Piper thinks that this is a clean hydration system that sustained life in this planet for a very long time. I found a room where the former people must have stayed in. Thousands of rooms cramped in this? I can't imagine living in such a place. I continued exploring and had to fix some wires to get the doors working properly again. See, this is why cable management is important. I eventually made my way to this control room where there were more cables to arrange. The first 2 opened up these monitors. There was a pattern on the smaller monitor, so I used that to arrange the cables and power up the next one. I did the same for the last monitor, which showed that for some reason, the people here decided to relocate to another area marked on the map. I tried to get out to go to that area to investigate, But rearranging the wires somehow messed with the sensors, keeping the water level in check, so I got stuck. Luckily, there was a strange object that gave my mech this new and fun ability called water walking. I was able to surf my way out of that area and head outside. With my new ability, I made my way to Tornado Rock Isle, where there are these strange trees that gives glow wood and fruit. I then collected some coil vine seeds and noticed that this area does not have any noxious slimes or weeds. I also got some fractalite ores and found this area with a waterfall coming out of an enormous skull. After that, I saw these structures from a distance. I was excited to meet the other residents of the island, so I ran towards them and realized that the structures are just ruins. Disappointed, I just started collecting artifacts here and watched the sunrise with my mech. The next day, all I did was look for the artifacts tier since somewhere in sneaky places. I got stuck finding 15 out of 16 artifacts for a good bit. It was near midnight when I found something glowing in this island that was a bit far from the ruins and finally got the last one and was rewarded with a recipe for a strange fountain. I haven't been home in just a few days and Arturo has decided to bring his friends to my homestead already. They've been freeloading and eating my crops like they own the place. After smelting some fractalite ores, I decided to finally start making paint since I've been neglecting that. I also constructed the color mixer and mixed yellow and red to get orange paint. Then I made another planter box to plant my coil vine seeds. I could now make a mansion for my house, but I am missing a lot of materials and resources. I was tired of passing out randomly outside, so I decided to bring some materials with me so I can build a place to sleep somewhere in Edge Cliffs. To make this easier, I built the items in my area first so I can directly use the items from my sheds. Then I made sure my inventory was clear. Then I recycled all the items so that all the materials will go inside my inventory. I made sure to have enough decorations so I can get the keen eye buff when I sleep. I chose this spot next to the waterfall in Edge Cliffs to put my hammock on. The whole process took the whole night to complete, and that's how my day 32 started. On hindsight, I wish I would have brought a tent instead of a hammock, but that will have to do for now. I gathered some copper ores and iron ores nearby, and I think at this point, my mech needs some repairs due to the amount of damage it was taking. I then discovered another ancient ruin and Piper confessed that she never told the people on Earth that there were signs of ancient civilization on this planet. She thought that they wouldn't like a planet with former inhabitants for some reason. The artifacts here were not that hard to find, but I had to do some parkour to retrieve some of it. I got the recipe for a strange fence and found out that this is a town ruin. It was getting late, but I still wanted to make it back home, so I took a leap of faith and attempted a shortcut to make it back down to the meadows. Thankfully, it worked with no issues, and I was still able to harvest these really pretty lum blooms and unlock the Pathmaker upgrade for my mech. I realized that I should have upgraded it sooner, since it also unlocks the Field Plow upgrade, which lets me freely create fields of mounds on the ground, meaning I won't really need my planter boxes anymore. In addition to that, I upgraded my seed shooter so it could lock on to up to 32 mounds. Day 33, I'm slowly coming to accept that Arturo and his entire clan will be a part of my homestead. I used the furnace to craft some light bulbs from Lum Bloom and discovered the recipes for light posts and string lights, which are really pretty. I tested out my plant composter again and saw that I could put some crops or grass inside to turn it into fertilizers. Since I've been working hard to get money, I splurged on the merchant. I bought 5 yellow and 5 white color sprouts since those two were the hardest to come by in the wild. It was also time to change my mech parts and I chose this woodwork set. I spent the rest of my money on decorations until I only had $6. Then I increased my inventory capacity and unlocked Field Plow. I could now remove my planter boxes here and just plant my seeds on the ground. I still had to wait until I harvest the crops here though. I planted my cauliflower sprouts in front of my house before messing around with the color mixer. I was able to craft a wide variety of paints. After that, I changed my mech parts and used brown paint to match my new woodwork theme. I really like this new suit, but the metal bars and leaf can get quite annoying. Day 34, my pond pitchers were fully grown and I can finally refill my mech here, which was awesome. I was a bit frustrated that they were facing weird directions, but that's okay since I'd have to transfer them once I remove the planter boxes anyway. I did some quests, then gathered more yellow crystal and iron ore in Mountainside Coast. It was almost nighttime and I was quite far from both my home and my hammock, so I just spent the rest of the day to search for the last resource that I haven't found here in Mountainside. I can now go inside this pretty cave, so I spent the night here. My new mech suit camouflages well inside. I finally found the last item the next morning. It was a plant called honey bottle, and there were only 3 pieces in this area. No wonder it took me a while to find it. I really need to start giving food to the creatures here so more resources will appear. After that, I went inside this really creepy cave filled with rats as big as me. I was really uncomfortable to be in a small cave with them, so I hurried back out, then found more honey bottle seeds in lowland plains. Back home, I got rid of some of my planter boxes and saw that the fertilizer from the composter somehow automatically transferred to my irrigation hose. So I planted my new seeds and tried using the fertilizer on some. Day 36, I got my first harvest of coil vine stem, processed some coil vine and lum bloom oil, then made a solar dehydrator, which I placed in a shaded area. I placed some coil vines inside to make some natural coils, which I need to craft a spring. Afterwards, I decided that my mansion and living space is going to be in another area separate from my industrial and agricultural machines. So I started planning out my mansion in this area right here. The next morning, I was able to harvest all the crops over here, so it was time to use my mech's field plow. The process was more difficult than I imagined, but Arturo was there to cheer me on. At first, I wanted to make it into columns like this, but it was so hard to make it equal and neat, so I just made it into a squarish field like this. I really like the lum bloom plant, so I planted all the seeds there in alternate columns. I didn't have enough seeds for that plant though. I stayed up all night working on my field and continued on to the next day. I got this awesome quest that paid me 20,000 for 50 chromies, so I was able to buy more seeds to plant in my new farming area. The merchant didn't sell enough seeds to cover the whole area though, so I was not able to make the pattern that I wanted to, but I at least got a bunch of crops growing. I then replanted my pond pitchers so I can have a close water supply here. I was also able to harvest my cauliflowers and process those into paint. I made sure to water the plants to hopefully stop it from wilting. After that, I upgraded my spike saw even more and started making my house area more cozy by adding a little gazebo with some decorations. Day 39, I still had money to buy more honey bottle seeds and all of the decoration blueprints from Lola. My cauliflowers also did not die, so I was happy about that. I then started laying down some paths to connect my house to other areas and added some more decorations in front of the house. I also put a storage shed and some items there, which are mostly just for decoration. Day 40. After most of the planning, the hard part was to actually bring the materials needed to fully construct the items, so I did that slowly. I then harvested my cauliflowers and unfortunately forgot to water the sprouts, so they wilted. Day 41, it looks like I'm doing a bad job at watering my crops since it didn't grow at the same time. I started gathering more hardwood since most of my decorations need it and discovered a shortcut from the meadows to Yellow Forest. I managed to construct almost all of my items, including my mansion, so I started placing small items on top of the tables. Day 42, I continued placing small items like some potted flowers and plants and more greenery to make my house look more lively. I also removed my old house since I now have a mansion to sleep in. Day 43, I brought more seeds and mostly planted the ones that glow during the night in this area. The next day, the pond pitchers were fully grown, so I was able to water my crops easier. I planted cauliflowers and put a fence around and also added some silos for storage. I then placed random farm items like hay bales and scarecrows. Lastly, I decided to move the high-tech looking items to another spot to make this area feel more farm-like. Day 45, I upgraded my hydro splash size to cover an even larger area. increased my water tank capacity, increased my vacuum harvester width, powered up my thruster booster, and upgraded lock-on targets for my seed shooter. It's been a while since I traveled far from my homestead, but I needed more materials, so the next day I went around to gather blue crystals, hardwood, coil vine seeds, and glow trees. With all my thruster booster upgrades, I was able to easily use the shortcut to get back home faster. There, I made more dehydrators and placed it beside my barn. I got off my mech for once to properly enjoy my new mansion as I went for bed. Day 47, I planted some glow trees around my house so that it'll light up the area once fully grown. I also gathered more copper and fed the creatures in the meadows so that the area will spawn more blue color flowers for my bulletin board quest. Day 48, blue color flowers appeared as expected. I also added some torches and lanterns around my farm area, so the place was starting to look good at night. I wish I had more glow trees here to light it up even more though. For the last 2 days, I just finished up the decorations and admired my new place that me and Arturo can now proudly call our home. This is my farming area, with all the color flowers now fully bloomed. I also added some grinders up on the cliff, mostly for decorative purposes. I placed my upgrade depot over here, so I can park my mech there when I'm about to turn in for the night. I also built a little flower garden over here with a bench where I can cool off under a parasol during breaks. Then there's this gazebo with some books and tea inside. And lastly, here's my house with a fountain, some seating areas, and a storage shed. Unfortunately, the glow trees have not yet fully grown, but I think the area has come out nicely. Hi, this is Myrabels. I hope you enjoyed watching my first 50 days playing Lightyear Frontier. I wanted to try and make a 100-day video, but this game is still in early access, so I opted for a 50-day one instead. I was not able to get the last mech upgrade and experiment more with the paint gun since I focused on building my base. I really love this game and will definitely play more. If you want to see me make a similar video once the full release is out, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you'll get notified.